The first letter showed up like a bad joke. Plain white envelope, no stamp, no return address. Just a red violation notice jammed into the mailbox of a cabin that had been standing on that mountain longer than most people's family names. I remember staring at it in the morning light, half expecting somebody to jump out from behind a pine tree and yell, "Gotcha," because there is something almost funny about being told your great-great-grandfather's cabin is suddenly illegal by people whose whole little association wasn't even a thought when this place was built. Then I saw the name at the bottom, Trina Dobbins, HOA chairwoman, and just like that, the joke stopped being funny. My name's Celis Kearney. I'm a carpenter, and I grew up in that cabin. My people built it in 1892, back when the mountain wasn't polished up and marketed with fake rustic signs and brochures promising exclusive ridge living. Back then, it was just timberstone weather and stubborn people. I'd spent the last year fixing the old place up for retirement, replacing warped floorboards, restoring the porch, patching the roof, the way my grandfather taught me, planning on doing what a man ought to be allowed to do on his own land, grow old in peace. That peace lasted exactly until the next morning, when Trina herself came crunching up my gravel drive in heels like she was marching into battle. She stepped out of a silver SUV wearing oversized sunglasses and a blonde bob so stiff it looked weatherproof. Clipboard under one arm, chin-up voice sharp enough to cut bark off a tree. She didn't shake my hand, didn't smile, didn't do one blessed thing that suggested she'd been raised with manners. "Mr. Kearney," she said, "I'm here to inform you that this structure is in violation of community building codes." I leaned against the porch rail and looked at her over my coffee. "You mean my cabin? The one that's been here since before your HOA was even a twinkle in somebody's overreaching little eye?" She adjusted her sunglasses like she was above the joke. "According to our records, no permit was ever filed. That makes it an illegal structure. It must be removed within 90 days. I laughed. I really did. Couldn't help it. "Removed, lady, this cabin's been here since 1892. You think it just sprouted last week?" Her mouth pinched tight. "Regardless of its age, it does not meet association standards. And 2 years ago, this area was annexed into the Maple Ridge Mountain HOA jurisdiction. That includes your lot." Now that got my attention. "Funny," I said, "I don't remember signing a single thing agreeing to that." "It was voted on by the board," she said. "I suggest you cooperate. Otherwise, fines will begin accruing immediately." Then she turned around, got back in that SUV, and drove off in a cloud of dust like some kind of suburban dictator on safari. I watched her disappear through the pines. Then I went down into the crawl space under the cabin and pulled out the old lockbox my grandfather told me about when I was a boy. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was the original deed hand-signed, sealed old enough to smell like time itself. I took it to the county records office the next morning, and sure enough, the microfiche copy matched it perfectly. The land belonged to my family fair and square. But the real surprise was one line buried in the old record, private in holding. That meant the parcel had never legally been absorbed into later land annexations. Not county reshuffles, not development phases, and definitely not Trina Dobbins's precious HOA. My cabin wasn't part of Maple Ridge, never had been. When I got home, there were already 2 more notices pinned to my door. One said I owed $500 in fines. The other ordered me to vacate. That was the moment I stopped being annoyed and started getting interested. I had the deed scan notarized and filed with the county assessor before sunrise the next morning. The clerk there, Mara, knew my family. Her grandfather used to hunt elk with mine, and when she slid that old document into a protective sleeve, she gave me a look that said she already knew where this was headed. Well, she muttered, "This is going to stir up a hornet's nest." "Good," I said. I was getting tired of quiet. She told me Maple Ridge had been trying to swallow up every scrap of land around the ridge for years, especially older parcels owned by folks too tired, too broke, or too isolated to fight back. That hit me harder than I expected. Suddenly, this wasn't just some petty HOA nonsense. It was a pattern. So I stopped by the sheriff's office on the way home. Sheriff Harris had known my people a long time. He read the notice telling me to vacate, looked at me over the top of it, and shook his head slow. "They've got no jurisdiction over that land," he said. "I know," I told him. "I just want it on record in case they try something stupid." He nodded. "If they set foot on your property again without cause, call me." So I did what any man does when he realizes common sense may not be enough. I installed motion cameras around the perimeter, checked every lock twice, and waited. The waiting didn't take long. That afternoon, a second SUV rolled up, black this time, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle people use when they want to look official without actually having any authority. 2 men got out. One had a clipboard. The other wore a jacket that said security consultant, which is the kind of title that usually means rented muscle with better branding. Mr. Kearney, the clipboard man, called. "We're here on behalf of Maple Ridge HOA. Your presence on this property is being evaluated for noncompliance." I stepped off the porch. "You're trespassing. We're conducting a preliminary inspection." "Got a warrant?" He hesitated. "No, sir, but under HOA bylaws." "Wrong again," I said. "I'm not in your HOA. You're on private land, and the sheriff already knows what's going on. Cameras are rolling. You've got 30 seconds. The security guy looked around once, probably noticed the cameras, then grabbed clipboard and said, "Let's go." They left. I copied the footage 3 times that night. The next morning, my power went out. At first, I thought it was weather, even though the sky was clear and the trees were barely moving. But when I followed the line downhill, I found the problem fast, clean-cut, neat as surgery, right where the power company's responsibility ended and mine began. Somebody had done that on purpose. I filed another report, then called the electric company. The repair guy Joel crouched by the severed line and let out a low whistle. "That wasn't no animal," he said. "Too clean. Somebody used a cable saw." He fixed it by sundown. And while he worked, the mountain felt different somehow. Not peaceful, not old and familiar, but watchful. Like the woods themselves had seen this kind of human ugliness before and knew how it tended to end. The next morning I went back to the courthouse and asked to see the HOA annexation records myself. The clerk printed out the map, and that's when the whole thing cracked open. The HOA boundary curved neatly around my parcel, until one corner where a line had been extended over my lot in different ink, different handwriting, no timestamp, no signature, no authorization. Just a quiet little forgery. I stared at it for a long second, then asked for a certified copy and called the one person I knew who would enjoy this fight almost as much as I suddenly did, Maria Alvarez. Maria was a land rights attorney, sharp as broken glass and completely unimpressed by bullies. She came up that weekend, spread every document across my kitchen table, and by the time she reached the altered plat map, her eyebrows had climbed halfway to her hairline. "This is fraudulent," she said. "Not shady, not questionable fraudulent. They forged a boundary extension. That's a felony." Now that was a beautiful word. By Monday morning, we were in the district attorney's office. Assistant DA Lillian Cho flipped through our stack, stopped cold at the altered map, and said the sentence that turned this from harassment into disaster for Maple Ridge. "This is not part of the official plat." Maria folded her arms. Then someone from the HOA falsified county records and used the forgery to issue threats and fines. Lillian looked up at us, eyes hard. "I'm opening an investigation immediately." That afternoon I came home to another letter in the mailbox. Final notice. Forced removal. No signature, no letterhead, just enough wording to sound threatening. Maria took one look and filed for an injunction the next morning. 48 hours later, a judge signed it. The HOA couldn't touch me, couldn't find me, couldn't come near the property until the investigation was complete. 3 days after that, the sheriff executed a search warrant at the Maple Ridge HOA office. And that's where the story turned. Because it wasn't just me. Turns out Trina had been targeting at least 6 other property owners along the outer ridge. All longtime residents. All people who'd never agreed to join the HOA. The plan was simple and ugly. Drown them in fines, threaten legal action, make ownership miserable, then wait for them to cave. Some had paid out of fear. Some had nearly sold. Most thought they were alone. They weren't. The criminal charges started with falsifying public documents and conspiracy to commit fraud. Trina got hit with coercion and unlawful threats. Neighbors who'd kept their heads down for years started stopping by, speaking in low voices, like they still couldn't quite believe somebody had finally pushed back. One old veteran up the ridge shook my hand and said, "Didn't think anyone was ever going to stand up to them." I told him the truth. I just wanted to be left alone. He nodded. "Yeah, but you did more than that." The first hearing was packed. I wore my cleanest flannel boots, scrubbed down folder under my arm. Trina sat at the defense table without the sunglasses, without the power suit, looking smaller somehow. Not harmless people like that are never harmless, but smaller. Her attorney looked nervous before the hearing even started, which is never a good sign. The DA led with the forged map, then the timeline, then the violation notices. Clean, brutal, methodical. Then came the twist that sucked all the air out of the courtroom. Subpoenaed internal emails. One of them, written by Trina herself, said, "If we can get the older parcels under our umbrella while they're distracted or unaware, we'll be able to triple reserve funds by next quarter. Don't give them time to push back." You could feel the room change, but it got worse. The investigator testified that a hard drive recovered from the HOA office contained spreadsheets tracking non-compliant parcels, projected revenue from fines, notes on pressure tactics, and my name highlighted in red with a phrase beside it that made the judge lean forward like she hadn't heard correctly. Apply pressure via utilities. The judge asked, voice cold as creek water in winter. Are you saying the HOA discussed interfering with utility services to compel compliance? Yes, Your Honor. Then the DA introduced an invoice paid to a private contractor 3 days before my power line was cut, followed by wildlife camera footage from a neighbor downhill. A man in a dark jacket crouched at the utility pole before sunrise. At that point, Trina's lawyer asked for recess. Smartest thing he did all day. Outside the courthouse, reporters were already gathering. Maria pulled me away before they could start asking questions, but the truth was, the scandal had grown bigger than one cabin and one spiteful woman. 5 more owners came forward. Then an old letter surfaced from a dead resident's files, using the same threats, same language, same ugly little formula. They'd been running that play for years. That's when prosecutors expanded the charges again: long-term coercion, attempted racketeering, wider fraud. And then came the final rot at the center. A county audit uncovered encrypted messages between Trina and a contractor with a polished name that meant absolutely nothing until investigators dug into it. Mountain Regional Asset Solutions. Sounded like consulting. Wasn't consulting. It was acquisition strategy. Push out elderly or isolated owners. Destabilize tidal force. Desperation sales route land to developers through shell buyers. My cabin had been flagged as a prime target almost a year before I moved back in. Isolated location, low surveillance risk, unclear title records. They were planning to steal my family's land before I'd even finished restoring the porch. That part settled in me different. Anger I knew, annoyance I knew. But that was something colder, the kind of realization that changes how you look at people forever. Because greed doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it shows up wearing business casual, talking about compliance, carrying a clipboard, smiling like theft is just administration. By then, the whole mountain knew. The HOA collapsed under audits, lawsuits, criminal charges, and public outrage. Reserve funds had been drained. Residents demanded refunds. More than 70% signed a petition to dissolve the whole thing. At the firehouse, the court-appointed administrator stood up and apologized in front of everybody, said the illegitimate fines would be refunded and the association would be dissolved unless the community wanted to rebuild it under strict legal oversight. Nobody raised a hand. Nobody. A few weeks later, the civil ruling came down in favor of the residents. Assets seized from the contractor network went into a settlement fund. People who'd been threatened, fined, cornered, or pushed toward selling would be compensated. Trina and the others were staring at charges big enough to crush whatever was left of their little empire. And me, I spent that morning behind the cabin turning over soil in my grandfather's old garden bed. That felt right. Because somewhere in the middle of all that mess, I learned something I wish more people understood. Sooner power gets dangerous when decent folks treat peace like surrender. Too many good people think staying quiet will protect them, that if they keep their heads down long enough, the bullies will eventually move on. Sometimes they do. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes silence just teaches predators where the fence line is weakest. By summer, the wildflowers were back. So were the neighbors, not with speeches, not with drama, but with peaches, tools, road gravel, extra hands. A man I barely knew helped patch part of the access road. Dana, the retired nurse from 2 ridges over, dropped off fruit from her tree. Somebody else brought homemade pickles in a mason jar and said, "You held the line." That stuck with me, because that's really what it was, a line. Not just on a map, not just around a parcel of land, but the line between living free and letting somebody with enough nerve and paperwork convince you your own life belongs to them. One evening, Maria came by after finishing the last filings. We sat on the porch while the sun went down behind the ridge, gold fading into blue wind, moving soft through the pines. No engines, no threats, no fake notices on the door, just the old cabin breathing easy again, the way it was meant to. "You don't get many endings like this, do you?" I asked her. She smiled into her coffee. "Not many. Usually the damage sticks." I looked out at the trees at the place my family built with hand tools and stubbornness and enough faith to imagine a home before there was even a road. "Sometimes it takes 130 years to build something that lasts," I said. "And when it does, you don't let anybody steal it with a clipboard." She laughed at that, quiet and tired and real. And that was it. No grand speech. No plaque, no victory parade, just a mountain settling back into itself, A cabin still standing, and the people who tried to take it finally learning that law cuts both ways. So let me ask you something. When people in power hide behind rules, signatures, and official language to take what isn't theirs, where do you think justice really begins? In the courtroom or the moment somebody finally says no? Tell me what you think in the comments. Who was right? Who crossed the line? And have you ever dealt with somebody who mistook your silence for weakness?